Right to Be Read podcast, episode number 136, interview with Dave Chasson.
You are listening to the Right to Be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Right to Be Read podcast, the podcast that inspires and encourages writers. It's me, as always, Ani Alexander, and I really hope that all of you who are doing NaNoWriMo are moving forward, are on track, and will end up with your novel at the end of November. I keep my fingers crossed for you. I keep encouraging you. I'm really proud of what you've done so far. Just keep punching those words and keep moving forward. So, and those who haven't done anything that extensive yet and are following their pace, that's okay too, because as long as you're following your passion and as long as you are writing at least a little bit every day, you're still fine. Okay, so today I am going to have yet another interview for you, and today's interview is going to be very interesting because I'm talking to someone whom I've known for quite a long time, and he's been listening to my podcast for a while, so he knows what we're looking for in terms of content and what we expect from our guests. So I'd like to introduce you to Dave Chasson, who, like me, is an Amazon best-selling author. However, using advanced online marketing techniques, he creates books and platforms that keep all of his books at the #1 bestseller mark for years. Dave is a marketing nut and the creator of Kindlepreneur.com, a free website devoted to teaching people the marketing side of being an author, which actually is the hardest part, right? So let's dive into the interview and see what Dave can teach us and what we can get from there. Okay, let's go. Hello, Dave. I'm really happy to have you over. It's kind of, it's always so interesting when I'm interviewing people I already know since a long time. Because, it's a different experience, first of all. And second, I'm kind of, always trying to keep this, the content and the listener on mind and not to drift too away from the subject. But I think with you it will be easier because you're definitely very close to the subjects that my listeners are interested in.
Well, that's great to hear. The other thing too is that, it's like we've done so many talks. This time we're just hitting record. So trying not to get off topic and talk about all the other stuff that we like to cover. It's going to be interesting. So really excited.
Yeah, it will. And the main reason I kind of decided that we have to talk in this formal way, and for these, many listeners I have, and, actually now I have much more than in the beginning when we started talking to you unofficially. So now you have a bigger audience to talk to. And is because I really like your website, Kindlepreneur.com, and I think it's very, very useful. So I want to start from there and find out how did you come up with the idea and why did you want to create a website like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't start with books. A lot of people start writing books and then they go the route of trying to figure out how to sell them. I actually started with building niche websites and creating, online traffic. So my core learning experience was finding where people had questions that hadn't been answered and then creating traffic sources that drive them to an answer I create. Okay. So I went through and I built all these websites out, and then one day it occurred to me, I was like, I'm depending on like Google AdSense and affiliate links and things like that to make this online money, but the key is to actually have your own product. And so I was like sitting there scratching my head. I was like, well, how do I come up with a product? I'm like, at the time I was stationed in South Korea. Now I'm in like Sri Lanka. You can't just make a product and sell. And somebody finally was like, well, just write a book. And I was like, oh man, that's a good idea. So I got into self-publishing, and I created these books that were aligned with some of my external traffic, these websites and these YouTube videos and things that I created. And I used those as actual like traffic streams to my books. And it really created this kind of neat, mesh where I was sending traffic to my books, and Amazon became really happy with that because they're like, wow, look at all these sales conversions to this guy. And then they were raising my books up to, the top of to the rankings. And so I was benefiting from Amazon's traffic. And so it really, by doing that, it's created a very stable and consistent sales record. And so after having done that, multiple times, I started realizing that, in the self-publishing world, there are some great people out there. There are some great resources out there, but I kind of had a unique twist based off of where I came from. So the idea of Kindlepreneur kind of came from, having this kind of crazy advanced online marketing background and really wanting to apply it so that, to make it easy and understandable for authors so they can find extra tactics and new ways to generate more sales for their books. And so Kindlepreneur was kind of that perfect mesh,
Yeah.
Entrepreneur.
Well, I'm really happy you did that, because most of us writers have completely the opposite problem. We know that if we want to write a book, some of us know what kind of book we want to write, and very few of us actually write and complete that. And then we're like, okay, so what now? Because we have no idea about what needs to be done so the book is actually sold. So you're kind of covering the hardest part, I think, of this whole chain by showing us what to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, though, a lot of people, one of the biggest mistakes I see writers make is that they will sit there and they'll say, okay, I'm going to write this book. And then they write it. And then at the end of that point, they're like, oh, man, okay, how do I sell it? It's like, whoa. I tell people the day you decide you want to write that book is the day you need to start marketing it. Not for the purpose of the big sales at the end of writing it, but I think that, using a lot of like analytics and really talking to your target market, you can write a better book. You're going to get their feelings, their beliefs. You're going to find out what the do's and don'ts, and what's working. And that really helps you as a writer as well. So, the good thing about today is that, we're surrounded by so much technology and such amazing online services that can really help authors, who's sitting in their home in like Wichita to, Istanbul to Colombo, Sri Lanka, be able to find their market, access them, and write the right book for that target. So,
okay, so let's pretend you're talking to a complete newbie here, and I've decided to write a book, and you say that I have to start marketing from day one and get feedback and stuff like that. So which are the steps? What would you do from the very start in that case? Let's say, okay, I agree and I have to do something along with writing the book. What exactly do I need to do?
That's a perfect question. I like this. Okay, so when you have that person, all right, the first thing I want the person to understand is there a market for your idea? Okay. Now, granted, we're artists, okay, and I don't want to stifle, artistic belief here, but it is so hard to create a market. It's much easier if you're able to create art for a pre-existing market. And what I mean by market is where there's a demand signal. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I tell an artist is make sure to go and look for validation, okay? Find that there truly are people out there that have a problem or have a desire, have a story, both nonfiction and fiction here, okay? And that it's not being met, all right? There are a lot of authors out there who are like, oh, man, I'm going to write a self-esteem book. It's like, well, there's like 50,000 of these self-esteem books out there. What are you going to do to really corner your market? Let's start thinking about that. So I tell them, let's look to see if people are actively pursuing this. And one of the tricks I like to use is I like to go to Google. Google has like 70% of all searches. And so if you go into Google, you can use Google AdWords Planner or Keyword Finder, kwfinder.com, and you can type in these questions, these phrases, these subjects, and it will tell you how many times a month people will type in that exact phrase. And that immediately tells you if there are people out there that are looking for information, looking for a type of book, looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And now you have a little bit more validation than just randomly thinking, I think underwater basket weaving on cold days is something people are truly looking for, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, about doing that, you can also find out the language that people are using. I really like to do this because, like, for example, some people call a resume. Some people call them a curriculum vitae. Other people call it a CV, and so forth. And, the fact of the matter is that by understanding that, I can now reach all three different types of people,
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Or the other thing is, I was working with another author, and she's going to be writing a book on how to write children's book. Well, her first book was how to market children's books. And, I was like, well, you do know that if Google's telling me that about 3,000 plus people a month are typing in how to write a children's book. So, and there's not much competition there. So, and bam, it was like a connection. I was like, oh man, totally didn't think about that. So I like validation, and Google is a great source for getting that.
Okay, I see. So basically, you have to find this balance between your creative ideas and the business side of it in order to make sure that it works, right?
Absolutely. Now, I know you have a lot of fiction authors like yourself that are probably saying, like, that's easy if you're a nonfiction guy. But let me give you an example of where this really works for the fiction people out there, okay?
Okay.
So anybody who's been on my website knows I'm like an uber sci-fi nerd. So I'm just going to stick with the sci-fi area just because that's how I roll. Now, I think you had the author for Solar Versia on your show a couple weeks ago, right? Toby.
Toby.
And let's use him as a great example, okay? Toby wrote this incredible book, and after listening to that podcast, I actually totally picked up all the books he talked about and that one. It was a great book, by the way. And he said, okay, he didn't invent a new book, okay? He didn't invent a new genre story thing. What he did was he created his own story, and it was about like an online virtual game that, the world was kind of competing in, okay?
Yes.
But where he was brilliant in this was he didn't try to create the market. He found where a market existed in fiction. And there is a really, really good book, Ready Player One, which was what he recommended, and I actually read it, and it is now my number one favorite book. But what he did was he said, okay, if people liked Ready Player One, then they will like my book, Solar Versia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So instead of trying to find these people that like virtual reality sci-fi books, he instead now finds people who like Ready Player One. Now that he knows there are a lot of people out there. He can go to Google and find out how many people are typing in Ready Player One, how many people are typing in phrases like other books like Ready Player One, see? And he's finding areas where he can go in like Quora.com and just start answering questions like that. Or better yet, Facebook, right? If you're doing Facebook advertisement, you have some great advertisement. If you're saying, hey, if you liked Ready Player One, then you're going to love this. Mm-hmm. So he found validation in a market because he found a book that was similar enough to be able to justifiably say, hey, if you like this, then you're definitely going to like my book. Yeah. So it's all about finding where there's a market and where there's an interest and using that as validation for your book. And at that point, if you can do that, you will have a much higher chance of success than if you just sit down and write your heart's book out and then you get to the end of it, you're like, all right, how do I sell this?
Yeah, I mean, unless you don't want to sell that, then it's okay. You just enjoyed the process of writing that novel, and it's kind of, the only thing that you wanted was to have your name on a cover. Then it's fine. But I don't think that most of the people who are listening to this podcast are from those groups. So I guess, what we're telling is what most of them would like to achieve. So eventually, even if you're thinking thinking about an idea that is not exactly the one that sells well yet, then maybe, you should consider modifying it slightly maybe, and then, use the same message, but, package it differently. Maybe that's another option, right?
Absolutely. And, there's always going to be those passion projects out there for sure. But, for me, for my website, that's why I got entrepreneur inside the domain, Kindlepreneur. Because it's nice to be able to, to not only write your story, but to get it out there for people to read too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've interviewed more than 100 authors by now, and most of them who are doing well are those who managed to get this balance and who actually agreed at the idea that both elements are equally important, and they do pay attention and put their efforts on both sides. That's the only way that it works later on, and it pays off. Otherwise, if you concentrate too much on writing and only write, unless you're outsourcing all the rest to someone who knows everything really well and can do it for you, then it won't work. And the other way, if you're doing too much of your marketing and spending most of your time there and don't really come up with new books, then it won't work either. So it's kind of, it's this balance and two elements that are really kind of, and the mindset that, it's a business. If you want to make money with your books, you have to treat it as a startup. Each book of yours is a startup, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Someone told that it's not my idea, but I don't remember the name to quote. So,
well, and I'll add to that and say that, and your name, your author name, is actually a brand.
Definitely, it's your personal brand, and it's very important what you do in all those online spaces as a writer and under your name, because, or the pen name, because it kind of accumulates and people see it, and they end up with an image of you as a writer. So you have to pay attention what you're doing, and if you're sending really mixed messages around, then you may have a problem.
You betcha. That's a really good question I like to ask you, actually, Annie, is that when you go through and you look at all those authors that you've had over the years, right? How many of them, just kind of sat down, wrote the book, and then figured it out at the end?
Well, less than half of them, like maybe 35%, 30% approximately. Because, I had more nonfiction writers than fiction writers. And nonfiction writers, actually, most of them ended up writing their books as a follow-up or continuation to what they were already doing. So they either needed it as a business card, or they needed it to leverage their speaking gigs and stuff like that. So they knew what they were doing and what for they were doing it. As for fiction authors, most of them actually, especially if it was their first book, they kind of wrote it. They learned everything they needed to learn with their first book, and later on kind of started actually implementing their knowledge with their next books, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you saw, did you read the book, The Martian?
No, not yet.
Okay. So Andy Weir, right? Great example. He sat down and he wrote the book, The Martian, which, everybody knows is a super big success, right? But what's funny is that he actually published pieces of the book online for validation.
Yes.
Yes. So, there's different flavors to everything. There's not just a cookie cutter formula out there that says, okay, every artist is different. They need a different guideline as they go through. We all have different strengths. I like Facebook. Other people will tell me I'm insane and that, I need to be on Twitter, or, Blab is awesome, right?
Yeah.
But some people, that's not their thing. But my point is that there's so many different ways to find success, and more importantly, to find validation in your story. And that can be in nonfiction and fiction. And we see people from Andy Weir to Toby Downton to, Ani Alexander, all having their different ways to figure out, the best foot forward for them so that they can make those sales and that they can make, get their word out there. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's kind of, I don't believe that there is one magic pill or there is such a thing as overnight success. So,
kidding.
Everyone I spoke to had many, many, many nights before the night they had the success. So it's kind of, it never happens overnight. We just don't see what's happening before that, and we don't really know the whole backstory. But usually it's never like that. I mean, I have writers who actually wrote every single day for years before they ended up with what actually later on started working. So it's never a thing that happens overnight, and it's never something that you can copy from other people's experience and it will work for you the same way. It's very complex. So I guess it's kind of, I am for making your own experiments and trying what fits you best.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, the big turnoff, there's two turnoffs to me, especially in online marketing, is when somebody's like, $30,000 in 5 hours, or something catchy. Oh my goodness. Roll the eyes.
Write
and then
a
the
book
other
in
one,
24 hours.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. Or then you got the other ones that are like, I will, in 3 easy steps, I will take you to success. It's like, okay. Well, but anyways.
Yeah, that's true. But anyways, let's get back to your website. And I want to talk to the free, very useful tools that you have in there, which I'm using very often. So let's cover that, because I'm sure that it's very useful, and it's something that any writer who has a book on Amazon needs to use them periodically. So tell us about those.
Sure. Well, the first one, and one of my favorites, and it's a little guy called KDP Calculator. Okay. And for every book out there, Amazon, the only indication of success that Amazon gives us is the Amazon bestseller rank, right?
Yeah.
And the rank is from 1 to whatever the total amount of books on Amazon are. So, like 1.2 million or something, or billion. God only knows how many there are now. So if you sold the most, then you're number 1, right? Well, basically this calculator, what you do is you can take anybody's Amazon bestseller rank, put it in there, and it will calculate approximately how many books per day that book is selling. So you can use this to figure out if somebody's very successful or if somebody's not, or how much money somebody is making. That can be a form of validation, like we talked about, to validate whether or not your subject is making money. Mm-hmm. The other thing too, for all those podcasters or other people that are looking into buying into somebody's, gimmick or training, is that, okay, so this guy's talking about $30,000, in a couple of nights. Let me go ahead and see how his book is really doing. And next thing you know, it's like, well, you're only selling like 2 copies a day, man. How does 30,000? I'm missing the step here. So it's a nice little tool. It's free. You just go there. You can find it on Kindlepreneur.com, and it will just pop it in there, and it will tell you. The second one is actually still in beta. It works, but it's right now we're just trying to make sure that it's perfect. And one of the things I like is that in your book description on your Amazon page, you can actually do HTML tags. Okay, yes. You can give it an H1, H2, H3. And then now maybe to some of you guys are like, guys speaking Klingon here. Okay, you can make words bigger. You can make words smaller. You can make them bold. You can make horizontal lines. You can do numbers and bullet points and all that. And for the people who know how to code in HTML, they're taking advantage of this, and they're making these really cool-looking book descriptions that like stick out and pop and have great sales copy, and they're getting better conversion. But for a lot of people out there, that HTML thing's a little crazy. So what we did was we created a free little box where you can write in your book description and then just highlight the words and click on how you want them to look. And when you're done, you'll actually see exactly what it will look like on Amazon. And if you like it, then you just click a button and it will generate that code, and you just copy and paste it in, and boom, your Amazon page will now look just like that. So.
Oh yeah, and it's really good, because it's not like many people are doing that, so you can really differentiate, and it looks professional and nice. So I really encourage doing that. And do I remember correctly that the sales calculator, you can have it as a widget on your own website as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to force people to have to go to kindlepreneur.com every time they're going to use that. So if you have a website and you want to put it on there, you don't want to send your people, to somebody else's website, go for it. It's actually on WordPress.com. You can just type in like Kindle or Kindle Calculator or something like that, and you'll find it. You can download it and use it.
Okay, amazing. So, what I was actually using this calculator for was if you have chosen a certain category or subcategory that you're going to have your book at, you can go ahead and see how many books per day the best sellers of that categories are selling. So like that, you will end up realizing how much you have to sell in order to get into these top rankings yourself.
Oh, yeah, because let's face it, if you can't get in the top rankings for a category, then you really don't want that category.
Exactly. So it's
sure.
Yeah, it's kind of, you do your research and you end up realizing how much is the estimate that you have to target in terms of sales for your first day. And then you realize whether it's realistic or not and how to move forward from there.
Boom. There you go.
Okay, so what do you have in place coming up soon? Like, any other tools that we have to wait for?
Well, like I said, that description generator, I haven't even come up with a name for the little guy either. Still in beta, but I'll go ahead and give you that link for your readers so that if they go to your website, they can click on it and start using it. It's just not pretty. We haven't made it look good. So you'll go to this blank page and you'll see a box. You'll be like, okay, well, I thought this guy had some kind of art in him. It's coming, but we'll go ahead and put that in the show notes so people can access it. But for right now, that's kind of where I'm focusing. I want to make sure it's a really good product. It's absolutely free. I don't even know why I keep calling it a product. It's 100% free, and it will always be free. So
it's a free product.
Yes, it's a free tool. There we go.
It's a free tool, yeah. And it's kind of, it's free, but it's useful because very often people, when they hear free, they think that it's, yet another thing.
There's some guy out there that's actually selling that service for $90, and I'm pretty sure that guy's going to hate me, but oh well.
Oh, okay. So don't pay $90. I don't know where it is, but if you find it, don't do that because a free version is coming. Okay, now he's gonna hate me too.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Okay, I hope I haven't interviewed that guy by now already.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but I mean, definitely we didn't come. I mean, we didn't talk about this unofficially before, so I mean, a disclaimer: I have no clue who that guy is. So anyway. Okay.
Now, one thing before we part, I just got to say this as a long-term listener, and you know this is coming, is that it was like my goal to try to get you to say book as many times as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
I have always loved the book. I love it. So I'm just gonna put that out there.
Oh yeah. It's kind of, my accent is something that I kind of I didn't like much in the beginning. That kept
awesome,
me.
No.
It kept me launch the podcast a year from when I initially thought that maybe I should have a podcast, and then eventually it turned out to be like the differentiator of my podcast, I guess.
Exactly.
So I don't know.
It's funny how those things that are that we find is different, in art really become unique.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I was kind of amazed in our country when a person has an accent while speaking foreign language. Somehow we have this perception that if you have an accent, it means you don't know the language very well. So, I mean, I know it's not true, but that's how we're used to think, and that's how many in here think. So I was kind of always thought that accents are kind of, the defect and the weakness of how you speak the language. So I always thought that if you are actually doing something that makes that weakness more obvious, it's kind of, you have to be crazy to actually put focus on the weakness. But apparently, I mean, it's not like everyone is thinking like that. So it's kind of, it worked. And for me, it was an experimental project. And now I guess it's, almost a year and a half that I'm doing a podcast. And people, even those who I guess in the beginning felt that strong accent, are already used to it by now. so I guess everyone has a word that they prefer, how I pronounce it. I mean, Dave's favorite word is book, and the way I say it is, I don't know what others prefer, but yeah, that's it.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on. Honestly, it's so cool to actually be on, one of the shows that good Lord, it's been a long time I've been listening to. So really cool to have, and thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks for listening, and thanks for Kindlepreneur.com, because it's really helps us out a lot.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks.
Take care. Okay. Well, it seems like that's all I had for you today. I truly hope that you enjoyed the interview. And if you like my podcast, please subscribe to it on iTunes and also leave a review for me there. Well, I guess that's all. In case you have written a book or you're going to finish your book soon, please consider our self-publishing services at publishmybook.today, and we will do our best to serve you. I guess that's it. Take care, keep writing, and I'll meet you in the next episode.